Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Straight Talk on Office Ergonomics. I'm Joe DeRamo. I'm one of the partners of My Pinnacle Network, which is one of the sponsors of our series of webinars, which includes South Shore Networking Professionals Group. They're a South Shore-based group, and they hold regular live networking events, which we now have live networking events. It's all good. My Pinnacle Network is a business-to-business networking group. We have 6 locations throughout Greater Boston. And the other sponsor is Rockland Trust, which my partner at My Pinnacle Network, Steve Dubin, says a lot about Rockland Trust. Do you have the full spiel, Steve? Or
I really don't, but what I can talk about is from personal experience. I've been a business and personal depositor there for over 30 years. And they are a very responsive bank with branches almost everywhere you turn. In addition to being a retail bank, they also are very strong on commercial loans and financial planning. And they've been generous to My Pinnacle Network in supporting this educational seminar series.
Right. And this is a series we began at the beginning of the pandemic, and we've continued as we kind of ease out of it. And this particular topic is a favorite of mine, Office Ergonomics. I've been working out of my home office for over 20 years now, and I have a ton of questions. I think I could take up this whole segment myself with topics, but I brought in a few experts. We have Jennifer Graham of JG Ergo Consulting. She's a certified ergonomic assessment specialist and a licensed physical therapist. Welcome, Jen. We also have Steve Wilson of Office Furniture Consulting in Braintree. And Steve is a longtime My Pinnacle Network member as well. So welcome to you both. We're going to let Jennifer talk first, and basically she's going to do a short presentation. Steve will follow up with his presentation, and then we're going to open it up to questions. And I think I know from the prep call that I did with Jennifer and Steve that there's so many questions, because now we're all working in not only in our home office, but the work office and back and forth and hybrid. And it's just created a lot of scenarios where people have questions. And Jen, I'm just going to let you roll, and we'll take it from there. Steve will monitor. So you just need to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I was going to share my screen. Can I do that now?
Yep, you should be fine.
Right. Thank you. Oh. I'm having a glitch here. Sorry. I seem to have a security issue or something here with sharing the screen.
Okay.
If you could just pause for 1 second. Sorry about that.
Steve Wilson, can you go to her pins and make sure she's a co-host? Top right on her.
Sorry.
So Jennifer, you had sent me a PDF. Is that your presentation?
Yes, if you could hear from your side.
She's a co-host.
Okay, thank you.
So let me share the screen here.
You could share the screen, that would be great.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, and can you go back one side? Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry about that glitch. So my name is Jen Graham. I'm a physical therapist. So I've been a PT for 26 years and have added certification. Those are Steve's slides. That's something else, Joe.
Sorry.
There you go. I think you're back. Okay, so recently I have been exploring more about ergonomics. So as a physical therapist, I've always reactively addressed ergonomics with my clients. So they'll come to see me for neck pain, and we'll talk about How are you sitting at your desk? What kind of pillows do you use when you're sleeping? What kind of recreational activities do you like to do? So again, as a PT, reactively addressing ergonomics for 26 years. And you can change the slide for me, Joe, that'd be great. So during 2020, I also had to be online with telehealth and online networking groups. So it became more apparent both personally and professionally how important ergonomics is. So I recognized how uncomfortable I was sitting at a computer. And then I also saw all of my colleagues on my Zoom networking groups. I was able to see their workstations in real time, real life, week after week, and then month after month, as we know the pandemic dragged on. And I was able to see their repetitive motions that they were doing over and over again that I knew would actually cause them challenges. So next slide. During that time period, I went back and got an additional certification to be a certified ergonomic assessment specialist. The reason is that allows me to work with clients independently and even out of state, which as a physical therapist, I'm a state licensed PT, I can't do so. So as a certified ergonomic assessment specialist, I can help get this message out to more people. So who does this apply to? It applies to literally everyone, employees and employers both. People, my hot button is working at your desktop, your computer, but it also applies to, I helped a patient yesterday who's a hairdresser who, really wasn't set up ergonomically well at her workstation because she had to reach up to the client. And so it's a simple solution actually that made a huge difference in her workday. So let's go to the next slide. What is ergonomics? I've had that question asked quite a bit. Ergonomics is the blending of the workplace to the worker. And here's the key, not the other way around. It's not that you need to sit up straighter. It's not that you need to be better about your exercises. It's not that you need to do something. It's that we need to have the workspace support you better in a better way. Your chair, your keyboard, your laptop, your arrangement of things on the desk, the repetitive movements need to change. So next slide. When do we think about this? We think about this before you have pain. Before you have pain. Again, in physical therapy, people come to me with pain. We think about it then, but it's much better to be preventative. You're going to be working at your workstation for hours, days, weeks, years, decades. So it's definitely more important to think about it preventatively and make the changes before you have pain. And again, they're simple changes. Next slide. So take out a pen and paper or just think or write on your laptop, whatever you'd like to do. But think about your workstation at home and at your office. Think about one positive aspect, something you really, really, really like and feels good about it. Then think about one negative aspect. And so in negative, thinking about specifically areas of discomfort or even pain. So sometimes people think about those areas of discomfort or pain, and again, they say, oh, I should just exercise more, or I'm just getting old, I'm gonna have this behind my shoulder pain. That's not the case. These areas of discomfort and definitely the areas of pain are warning signs, warnings. Your body's warning you about areas that you should take care of. And if you're only feeling them while you're working, you're not feeling them when you take the dog out for a walk, you're not feeling them when you're cooking dinner, then it's likely being caused by or being made worse by the situation that you're sitting in day after day. So next slide. Okay, why do we think about these areas of discomfort? Because pain and these situations, back pain, carpal tunnel, headaches, neck tension or strain, TMJ, tendonitis, those things are cumulative trauma injuries. What does that mean? It means it's repetitive stress over lengthy periods of time to areas of your body that aren't made to take up that kind of stress that creates these kind of injuries. So it's important to think about again, because you're not going to feel it right away as, ooh, that's a big bad something. It's something that accumulates over time. So that's why I want you to pay attention to areas of discomfort. Next slide. So this is important for the employee and the employer, because if you look at on the OSHA website, there's actually a calculator that describes the costs of these cumulative trauma injuries. So the direct cost of an episode of carpal tunnel syndrome that requires treatment, OSHA estimates that the average cost of a single carpal tunnel syndrome claim amounts to over $28,000 with an average of 30 days off of work plus the indirect costs. So it might not be 30 days straight. It might be 30 days and it might be, a few days in November, a few days again in January, then a bad stint in February. But these are these injuries that sort of keep creating problems over a longer period of time. So next slide. Next slide would be great. So, we can go back one.
Sorry. They look the same.
They do. Yeah, I did that. I know, I did that. The marketing piece isn't really my expertise, but the ergonomics is. So these two slides look the same because I'm emphasizing again the importance of addressing something like carpal tunnel syndrome. The indirect costs are something we don't always think about. So lost work days, decreased productivity, time and cost to train a replacement employee, decreased morale of everyone around who has more of the workload, penalties if there's something that not necessarily at a computer, but if it's like someone working at a place that they're lifting heavy things or working on a conveyor belt sort of thing, there can even be OSHA penalties associated with those type of injuries. The piece that I want to emphasize is these are all problems if you're working in a big space, but think about if you're self-employed or if you're the one who's in charge of your day and in charge of your income. These kind of issues, if you can't use your keyboard and you're someone who's on it all day long, they can be devastating for someone who's self-employed. So again, taking care of these things early, listening to these little warning signs is important. So next slide. Okay, so it's too short of a time period for me to fully go over each and every angle of what's important to look at your own workstation, but I want us all to think about posture and positioning. So this graphic looks at the human skeleton, and there's something, that line that's drawn right down the middle is called the plumb line. That's where the ear is over the shoulders, over the hips, over the knees, over the ankles. This is where your body's in great alignment for it to work most efficiently and effectively. You're putting the muscles, the tendons, the joints, the ligaments in the right position. So this happens. People sit up straighter when they look at this situation. So I love that. So this is where our body works more efficiently. Now, again, I started out by saying this is not your job to sit up straighter or do better or do more exercises. It's the job of your workstation to support you in this alignment. So you might have a great chair, but if you're sitting perched on the edge of it, it's not helping you because all of that alignment, you can see what that did to the whole body to perch on the edge of the chair, not great. One of my favorites during these Zoom networking calls was everybody's very invested in what they're doing in work or in a conversation. So they'll tip into the screen this way, which is just, if you think about the alignment of the skeleton, that's horrible. It's actually especially bad for your neck because you're leaning forward, holding the weight of your head, and then you're tipping your chin up, compressing all those very important structures at the top of your cervical spine. So number one takeaway, if you find yourself in Zoom calls leaning in and tipping up or working on your computer in that way, that needs to change. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, question. Think about your own workstation. Does your current workstation support that posture, that alignment that we just looked at? Okay, next slide. So looking at this picture, it looks funny, right? Everybody says, oh my goodness, of course he's slouching forward. Of course that needs to be changed. But think about how close your own positioning might be to this picture when you're really invested and you're 3 hours into work and you're meeting your deadlines and you're really focused. A lot of people get into this position or are very close to this position during that part of their day. So next slide. Okay, next one is the work from home station. So think about this. You're working from home, you're trying to get into a comfortable space, you don't want to be sitting at a desk anymore, you're on a laptop. And so this is the kind of situation that we get into. This again is just, it's worse. It's adding bad onto bad, because if you think about that alignment, he might think he's on a comfy couch, he might be engaging with his family, but ergonomically, he's putting a lot of stress on his body that doesn't need to happen. Next slide. So the things that I work on with people, I work with employees to look at individualized assessments and reports for their patients. I help make physical changes to the workstation. I give specific equipment recommendations, because think about this. Should someone who is 6 foot and very, strong and muscular versus someone who's 4'11", it may be equally strong and muscular, because they have the same fitness level, do they require the same chair? No, absolutely not. And sometimes they need like a customized chair that suits even the length of their tibia, the length of their lower leg. You might have two people the same height and they need a different setup because of the specific differences in their bodies. So specific equipment recommendations, I can't emphasize enough. Individualizing the recommendations is super important. For the employers, I offer leadership training, workplace wellness programs, on-site consultations, safety programs, all revolving around ergonomics. So with that, I wanted to just go to the next slide. Okay, a quick overview. Again, this does not apply to absolutely everyone because you might be in a very different position than your neighbor. So sitting versus standing. Sometimes people say, I'm going to solve the problem with a standing desk. Okay, at first glance, that seems great, but you have to make sure that you're in an ergonomically correct position when you're at that standing desk, because you, again, could make something worse by just raising the surface of something that wasn't set up right to begin with. So next slide. Okay, a quick demonstration. One moment. So with that, you can take a chair that you're in currently, and it may have a great back. But again, if you're sitting perched on the edge of the chair, that means that back is not suiting you independently. So think about your own chairs as you're sitting there. And then if you scooch back and you think, okay, when I'm sitting, do I look like that skeleton if someone looked at me from the side? Or am I a little bit slumped forward? Am I molding into the position of the chair? Because a lot of those fancy chairs are big executive chairs, but they don't have a lumbar roll even. So if you think about, am I sitting, if someone looked at me to the side, is my ear over my shoulder, over my hips, or am I molding into the chair? If you're molding into the chair, probably looking into a different chair would be helpful, but as a temporary solution, you can take a small pillow or I use lumbar rolls and put it right behind your back, right down in that lumbar curve, and then it supports you so that you're supported. You're not having to work hard to sit up straight. You're then just supported by the lumbar roll. If you don't have a pillow, you can take a sweatshirt, roll it up, put it behind your back. You can take a beach towel if you're at your home office and roll it up and put it behind your back. You could buy a lumbar roll, or you could buy a fancy $70 pillow to put behind your back. But that's just, again, a teeny tiny little change that will make a dramatic difference in your alignment while you're hopefully looking for a better chair for yourself. I think as far as a summary, the pieces I would emphasize, number one is that movement is your best ergonomic solution. So most of us get invested in the work, again, can sit there for 2, 4, 6 hours and not even move. I recommend often even just using your iPhone, put a timer on, and when that timer goes off, just stand up and move a little bit. I'll leave you with Cornell University, did a few studies and came out with a recommendation of, if you're going to be at your workstation for an hour, sit for 20 minutes, stand for 8, and walk around for 2. Sit for 20 minutes, stand for 8, walk around for 2. So that's, again, giving you those position changes. It's not just standing for long periods of time or moving constantly. It's just giving doses of that movement as medicine throughout your day.
All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer. And I forgot to add some. It looks like somebody already did it. But while the presenters are going, if you have a question for the Q&A session, just put it in the chat, and Steve will be monitoring it. Steve Dubin, that is. Now we're going to head over to the other Steve for the piece of it that's important, as well as the equipment part of it. So, Steve Wilson, let me grab your presentation. Can everybody see this okay? Okay, Steve, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Steve Wilson. I sell office furniture. I've had my own company for over 30 years. 2 weeks ago, I was up at a showroom in Wilmington, Mass, and a gentleman came in and said he was creating a home office situation for himself, and he needed a desk and a chair that would be applicable and would fit in his home office. So anyways, I asked questions about how long was he going to be in the office during the day. And he said 7 to 8 hours a day, maybe sometimes 9 hours. And I said, well, we got to start with the chair first. The chair is like probably the most important piece of furniture for ergonomics in the office. It's probably the most important piece of furniture, period. Because a desk is a desk. And all the accessories that come, you can look at online. You could probably even buy most of that stuff online with descriptions of what they do and everything. But a chair you have to sit in, test drive, and see if you can adjust it in a way where you feel good about your physique, your posture, and that you feel like you can work for a while in that particular chair. In the picture is a typical chair with a mesh back. You'll see a bunch of adjustments on the right and the left where they're usually located. Most of the chairs today look like that with the mesh. It's a copy of a Herman Miller Aeron. Once Herman Miller came out with the Aeron, there was a bunch of copycats. And so that's what you'll see today. Next photo, please. The key thing about a chair is adjustments. Height is the first one. Everybody's got different heights and leg sizes. And it's important to have your legs where you can either stretch out or be perfectly vertical, almost like at a right angle with your chair. It's the chair seat. And so that height variation is rather important to make sure that it goes up high enough or low enough to fit you well. The next really important adjustment is seat depth. Jennifer mentioned about leaning forward and being on the edge of your seat. Well, that's not good. If you're able to change the seat depth, that will fit your form better. And once you get comfortable in that, it's good to keep that particular depth constant. There's usually a lumbar support in the back of the chair, not on the chair that's pictured in this diagram, but it's like a little mechanism / pillow that you can change the height of. You have to stand up, walk to the back of the chair, and move it up and down, then sit in the chair and see if that's hitting the area that you need support in. And there might be other areas in your frame, your skeletal frame, that needs that same lumbar support, but a different height. Well, you can get up and change that height. So that's an important adjustment as well. A locking back, I think, is one of the more important ergonomic aspects in a chair for back support. It's nice to have free flow and be able to lean back, but I find for my physical form that a locking back gives much better support and I'm able to work much better. Periscoping arms is something else. It's good to have your arms at different heights, especially might go into carpal tunnel syndrome, and the arm height might help that. Another adjustment, I think that should cover most of the adjustments on a chair.
Steve, can I break in for a moment?
Sure.
There was a question in the chat about alternatives to the very high-end manufacturer that you mentioned.
Yeah, one automatic alternative is a pre-owned option. And the only drawback on pre-owned is making sure that you can access an adjustment manual. Usually, if you know the manufacturer and the series or the type of chair, you can go to the website and there'll be a full description of the adjustments that you can utilize. Sometimes there's a little tag that you pull out from the arm pad that will give you a breakdown of the adjustments as well. A refabricated pre-owned is a really great way to go. You'll save money and you'll have a chair that will basically be almost new. Another strategy for saving money is there's some mid-range chairs that might do everything else that a high-end chair does. And that's important. It's good just to make sure you do research on it and see what the longevity of the mid-range chair is. If you go to Staples or some of the other big office supply places, the life line of the chair or the longevity of the chair may not be too great, maybe 2.5 years tops, and then they start breaking down. So you got to research that if you're going to buy new mid-range. A lot of times the pre-owned might be the best value, more bang for your buck. There was something I was going to mention as well about lean back, change your height. Yeah, it's about the adjustment brochures. Those are like really important. And so you have to go online a lot of times if one isn't readily available. And you can research the chair to make sure that you have knowledge of the adjustments. There's some chairs I've sat in for an hour and I couldn't figure out all the adjustments because they're kind of hidden. There might be a little button underneath the chair that it's hard to find. So this gentleman in Wilmington finally picked out the chair that he liked a lot. And then he picked out a desk that was just a standard desk. And I said, oh, are you sure you're going to be happy with that? Because a lot of people are going to sit-stand desks right now. And there happened to be one on the showroom floor, and I showed him what it could do and what kind of price point it was. And he got rather excited about that. And there was a monitor arm. Can we go to the next picture, Joe? So here's the sit stand. And one's, of course, standing, one's stool height, and then one is sitting. And I think Jennifer would agree that all three positions would be good, but not all in one day. You have to vary it, like she was saying, in an hour to do different positions. So that's the key. I guess movement is the key for skeletal frame. It seeks variety. So he was thrilled about the sit stand. And all of a sudden I went from a regular desk to a sit stand. I told him that if he did stick with a regular desk, he might want to do a monitor riser or monitor arms that would attach to his desk, where he could stand at a regular desk as well and just bring his computer monitor up to standing height. Next picture, please. These are typical monitor arms. This is for 2 screens. It attaches to the edge of a work surface or the edge of a desk. If a desk doesn't have a lip like that, you can still get the monitor arms attached to it by 4 screws. That would be screwing into the desk, but that is a small sacrifice to make sure that you got monitors arms that will allow your computer screen to be at the correct height where you're looking directly at it as I'm looking into the camera screen. Not up, not down, but directly into it. Standing or sitting, you're going to be able to have to adjust those monitor arms. So when you stand, you're looking directly at your screen, or when you're sitting, you're looking at your screen. In regard to the man in Wilmington who was looking to outfit his home office, he ended up getting a sit-stand desk, a chair he liked, monitor arms. He started out with a basic desk and a chair, and it was a natural upsell for me to prevent pain that he might suffer in the future. And it was a good ergonomic illustration, I thought.
Okay.
And that kind of wraps it up.
All right.
Steve,
I can see from our chat room that we've accumulated a bunch of questions. So Steve, if you want to, Steve Dubin,
Right.
if you would like to turn to those, and we can have a little Q&A period here.
Sure. So Steve Wilson, there was a question about where do you find a used high-end chair, Herman Miller, like the initial one you mentioned? Do you have access to those, or where?
Yeah,
do
I do. There's a number of different showrooms in the state, and it's real important to go sit in the darn things, because a high-end chair may not be what's the best way to go. You might find a mid-range chair that's better for you. And I've seen that happen several times. So everybody's skeletal frame is different. And so what may work for me may not work for someone else. I have working relationships with 3 or 4 different showrooms locally. 2 are on the South Shore, one's in Boston, and one's in the North Shore. So I could cover most people on the East Coast anyway.
And Steve, if someone wanted to test drive one, could they literally borrow it for a day or two, or how does that work?
So if they go into a showroom and they say, yeah, they like this chair, could they take it back and test drive it? I try to leave that option open. I'll talk to the people in the showroom, and usually they're amiable about letting them go as a demo. I brought a demo to a health stop over in Taunton, Mass, and they ended up buying 31 chairs. It was a general ergonomic chair, but it's great to get demos that they can sit in for several days and have different people try.
Okay. And
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, I would assume at the end of this presentation, Jennifer and Steve, you'll share your contact information. So if people have specific personal questions, they can reach out to you after this. Yes?
Yeah, we'll put that in the follow-up email. So I have a couple of questions for Jen regarding, well, first off, you talk about, you don't want people leaning forward. How much of your back should be in the chair? Is it just to your mid back, or should you be like all the way back in the seat, or what's the proper positioning for your back? And the second part, Jen, if you want to touch on this, is what about your feet and legs?
Yeah, so I'm happy to touch on that. I have a hard time condensing all this information, so I love these questions because I really want to know what's important to you. So supporting your back is important when you're working. I would say most important to support your pelvis correctly and your lower lumbar spine. So meaning like the curve of your back, and if you can put your hands on the back, on your low back, you'll feel like the lower curve. That area is very important to support. So you'll see, and probably Steve has a lot of different chairs that people can try, that some of them come up and are all the way up to the back of the head. Some of them are very low. They're task chairs that only support the lumbar spine. If I had to pick the most important, I would say get that pelvis and lumbar spine in the right place, and everything above that falls in line. I can even take a kitchen chair and put a couple of pieces together for people and make it more supportive, meaning I'll put a cushion that they can sit on, a lumbar roll, and then make sure their feet, good point, are properly supported. Because the reality is you should invest in a really good adjustable chair, but I find many of my clients don't or can't or won't or can't buy 2, one for work from home and one for the office. So I think, and I have many people who work in a number of different spaces. They might go to different offices or different spaces. So I like to give you ideas too on how to make whatever you have work for short periods of time. your question about your legs, and this again, you can kind of think about your own workstation. Your feet should be firmly planted on the floor. So you can think about how you're sitting right now. Some people are going to have their feet up on the casters. Some people are going to have one foot tucked underneath them. Your feet should be firmly planted on the floor, and your knees should be bent about 90 degrees. So if someone was looking at you from the side, should be at a right angle, and your hips should be bent about 90 or 100 degrees. 100, sometimes even they say 110, meaning tilted backwards to open up the front of your hips. So if you're at 80 or 70 leaning in, that's really not helpful. So feet firmly planted, 90, and then pelvis squarely supported, lumbar spine supported.
And I know one of the things during our prep call with the three of us was that I did a little research and found that not only my chair wasn't high enough, but my desk wasn't high enough. And I'm sitting down. So, and I know from a mutual acquaintance of ours, her big issue was her feet. Like she needed to have something to put her feet on because she was having leg issues. And I know that's been an issue of mine, having knee issues from being at my desk.
Right. And that's, I always say it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube. Ergonomics is like a Rubik's Cube. We even have a post on that because you can fix the red and then you just messed up the blue and the green. Literally, because, Joe, that to your point, you can raise your chair up so that you're, above it and your arms are in the right spot, but then your feet might be dangling and that puts a lot of stress on your low back. So then I've gone into offices and put paper reams under people's feet so they can actually sense the difference. When we put the right number of paper reams, it takes the pressure right off of their back. And then they can go explore the footstools with Steve and really look at like, what do I want to invest in? But my job is just to put you in the place that you can sense that, okay, wow, that feels better in the first 30 seconds. If I do that all day, I'm going to be in a much better place at the end of the day.
One of the questions, some people have opted to use stability balls as office chairs. If you just want to touch on that, both of you.
Yeah, I'm happy to mention stability balls weren't meant to be sat on for an extended period of time. So I think some of those chairs at first glance are good, but they're meant to be just a little movement break, maybe. They're not meant to be sat on for long periods of time. There's some clinical studies that have been done that suggest that your lower lumbar muscles, the small little muscles, fatigue very, very, very quickly when you're sitting unsupported, and especially when you're sitting on an uneven surface. So that's not good. You're not going to feel great, but it also may even put you at risk for injury. Say those muscles are fatigued and then you go play tennis, Steve, at the end of the day, or you go lift a heavy box out of the attic. If those little muscles have been working hard just sitting for an entire day, it doesn't leave enough for them to do other activities. So it might be okay for short periods of time and for movement breaks, but not for extended periods of time.
They might be good for 5 or 10 minutes as a break exercise away from the desk. Also, years ago, there was a kneeler where you'd kneel at your desk and you'd sit on a higher part of the kneeler. And those things were really popular gizmos for a while, but they all ended up in people's closets because I don't think they were good ergonomically in the long run.
No, the way I think of it is, why do you want to work hard, in that way for your low back? You'd be better off to do a few back exercises, periodically throughout the day. And that's something else I like to talk about and didn't have time, was these ergo breaks. So breaks in your day, ergonomic breaks that you will do stretches or strengthening exercises that help reverse the posture that you're in throughout the day. Anyone who's sitting gets tight hip flexors, tight hamstrings, that can contribute to back pain. So you'd be better off sitting in a supportive chair, doing a few of those exercises intermittently through the day and saving your back, just working your back in the way that it's meant to be, not in a way that it's really not meant to for such an extended period of time.
Jennifer, can I break, and Joe, can I break in? There was a question in the chat from a guest that I also suggested early before we started the webinar, which is carpal tunnel and the fact that we're all rubbing our wrists below the screen as we listen to this webinar. You want to address carpal tunnel a little bit?
Sure, I'm happy to. So carpal tunnel symptoms come from the compression of the median nerve in the carpal tunnel in the region of the wrist here. So there's a number of different ways that it can come about, and I won't pretend to know why for everyone here, but there's a couple of hot buttons, things to look out for. So it's definitely a repetitive use injury. It should be that your wrist is in a neutral position throughout the day. It should not be that your wrist is in a kicked up position to hold on your mouse like this throughout the day, because that puts that whole area on stretch for extended periods of time in repetition. So I would look at your mouse and see if your mouse is adequately fitting your hand. And there are actually that you could look up online. There's lots of information online, but there's information about how to measure your hand for your mouse and to pick the appropriate mouse size. So you don't want it kicked up this way. Definitely not. It should be neutral. And then the other piece to look for is sometimes people try to remedy that situation with a wrist rest, the squishy gel pad. Wrist rests should be used, if they're used at all, it should be that you're hitting here, not here with that compression, because you're compressing the median nerve. And if you push there and do this, that's like a double whammy. So I would say get rid of the wrist rest, or if you're going to have to use it for rest, then rest it here, not here. And then it goes back to Steve's point with the adjustable chairs. It may also be that your chair is not adjusted appropriately. So you're maybe reaching up to your computer, maybe you're kicking your hands up this way to reach it because your chair all the way from the ground up is not adjusted correctly. Lastly, but also important, is your keyboard. So someone like Joe, if you're on one of those little teeny keyboards in here, you're setting yourself up for not only, carpal tunnel, but some of the tendinitises that we see more often. You need to be able to, really work out here. So those split keyboards, ergonomic keyboards, those are going to be better because you can, again, your posture, if you think about the way your body's aligned, your arms are meant to be, I have a black shirt so you can't see, but they're meant to be straight down. They're not meant to be here while you're working. So you can start to create problems all the way from the shoulder down to the wrist. And again, the symptom is the carpal tunnel, but it may be from an inappropriate chair, an inappropriate keyboard, a wrist rest, or something to do with the position of your wrist itself.
And as a follow-up question, can you provide maybe as a follow-up email some exercises both for carpal tunnel and general, sort of stretching throughout the day if you are stuck at a desk? What should we do to try to relieve all those tight muscles?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Sometimes I'm a little bit adverse to just throwing out exercises that would apply to everyone because of my physical therapy background. I think if I were only doing ergonomics, I would say, sure, here's the top 5 exercises. But that's sometimes a little bit tricky because I've learned that the same exercises don't apply to everyone. And I'm really serious about that. I might give you a pec stretch, which is just standing and doing this. But if you've dislocated your shoulder ever, even when you were 3 years old, that would be the worst thing that I could give you. If you're having what you think is carpal tunnel, but you actually have a wrist tendinitis, I could be giving you a wrist stretch, which is reversing the keyboard, but that's going to make you worse, so much worse if it's a tendinitis because you're really pulling on it and it's not helpful. So I don't tend to just give a blanket do this, but I can tell you, think through how do you reverse the posture that you're in all day. So if your hands are like this and they're feeling all crampy, well, it's probably just the opposite direction that's going to be helpful if you don't have any injuries in the background. If you're closed in like this, then it's probably as simple as some things that are going to open you up throughout the day. If your knees are bent all day, then it would be straightening your leg and kind of leaning forward, stretching out those hamstrings. The other piece I always mention is if you're truly sitting for 6, 7, 8, 10 hours in a day, a couple of exercises isn't going to budge the seesaw. So you've got to incorporate those movement breaks as well as the exercises.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So look, I had a couple of questions. One is I've been doing some research on standing desks and benefits of that. And one of the things I'm looking into is kind of the high back bar table, sort of like you'd see in a restaurant or a bar, and using that where my legs would be kind of dangling instead of that 90-degree angle. Is pros and cons to that?
So pros, sorry, if I can jump in real quick. And then, so
Okay, both of you.
communicator, I didn't mean to jump in, Steve, if you were. So from a PT perspective, from an ergonomic perspective, standing bar, great. Sitting on the edge of a chair, bad. Contact stress right in the middle of your thigh because your legs are angled down.
Yep.
Talk to Steve about those task chairs that are elevated and have the little piece that you can put your feet on. Secondly, if you're there, you're probably thinking about using your laptop, and that's one part I didn't include in the slides, but laptops, it's absolutely impossible to make those ergonomically correct by themselves. You cannot be on a laptop and be in a good position for your body. Absolutely not possible. So the solution is an external keyboard, like you were showing, Joe, and I have one here, an external keyboard, alignment correct, and a laptop stand, which actually I'm on now, and I can show you really quickly, but a laptop stand that takes up no space, but you can see when I'm talking, I'm looking straight at my screen. I'm not looking down at a laptop. So if you're having to type, it's external keyboard and laptop stand. And I would move that to your kitchen counter, to your bar table, to your standing desk, to wherever you are. I would not recommend any extended period of time on the laptop.
Okay.
Sorry to jump in, but Steve's got the idea on those tall chairs. Talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, with a tall chair, they should have a footrest of some sort. I know when I'm kind of a digital nomad these days, where I'm working in multiple places, and I've been working at a cafeteria where they have the high back chairs, and the table itself has a footrest. So I'm putting my feet on that, and I've noticed my knees are feeling so much better from that setup. Granted, I'm not looking, eyeball to eyeball with my monitor, but it's for a short period. So that's the genesis of that question. Do any folks have some, I see one question in the chat. How long should the movement breaks be? And is it difficult for that individual, and how long between both on and off average? Okay, so basically, when should you be taking breaks and movement breaks?
Yeah, so that is somewhat individual, but I can tell you a lot more than you are is the answer for most people, because you get very invested in what you're doing and you don't realize how long you're sitting there in that same frozen position. And then you wonder why you're exhausted at the end of the day, or you're tired, or your achy shoulder, or that knot behind your shoulder. So the short answer is a lot more than you are, but the official answer, and I do love that study out of Cornell University that says, you want to think about interspersing movement breaks throughout the day. So it's not standing desk for 4 hours. It's not sitting on a ball for 30 minutes. It's thinking about little bits of movement. So my favorite is the one that I quickly went over, but if you think about a half an hour and you sit for 20 minutes, you stand for 8 minutes, you move around for 2. You sit for 20, you stand for 8, and you move around for 2. So in that's 20 minutes of that hour that you're actually doing something other than sitting. So 20 minutes in that hour times 8 hours in the day, you do the math. That's a lot of movement in the day that you're not getting now. And what I like about that is you're getting fluid moving in your joints. You're getting extension of some of those muscles that are all cramped up throughout the day. You're even changing the pressure in your spine and your discs when you get from sitting to standing. So it's literally like bursts of movement throughout the day. If you could think about taking a Zoom call standing instead of sitting, if you could, take a conference call pacing in your office on an AirPods or earbuds, that's better for you than sitting. Do you really need to sit for each of the tasks that you're in? Or can you just put movement in the day? I think, again, iPhone timers, you'd be shocked if you set it for 20 minutes and then when it bings, just move and then set it for 20 minutes again. And people will tell me, I can't break up the work in 20 minutes. Fine. If that timer goes off 3 times or 4 times and you have not yet moved, then that's alerting you to actually how long you're staying in that spot. So it doesn't have to be exact, but moving as much as you can is helpful.
Okay. We're kind of wind down the webinar here. So if anybody has any questions, just throw them in the chat. One thing I'd like to share was the first time I spoke to Jennifer, she asked me a question. She's like, "Are you sitting on something?" And it was a virtual call. And I'm like, "Well, yes, I am." How did you know? And it kind of segues into one of the services she offers, which is why I wanted to bring it up. So if you could maybe touch on your virtual ergonomic assessments.
Yeah, that was probably a little bold on our first meeting for me to, give unsolicited advice. but I really felt like you can tell a lot by the movement patterns. And there was something about the way you were moving that I just thought, oh, there's something not okay about the chair. So it was with the best intentions. But
it's true.
I do remote ergonomic assessments. So meeting just like this, and what I do is have someone use their phone or their iPad or even an assistant, a family member, an assistant in your office, just meet with us so that I can see, okay, if you're sitting in the real life, the way you work, and someone's holding the phone to the side, what do those angles look like? If we look down and we see from where your wrists are and your hands are, what do those angles look like? In real life, often I'll say in the first few minutes, like, no, don't just sit back perfectly, because that's not what actually happens in your day. So spending a little time to actually see what happens. Now, everything is better in person. I firmly believe I can do a better job in person when I can actually see how you're moving. But the remote ergonomic assessment is also super helpful and way better than looking up everything online, because you can't get a sense of your own movement patterns. Most of us aren't kinesthetically aware enough to even know, is that 90 degrees at my knee or 80 degrees at my hips versus 100? Like you can't, it's hard to do that for ourselves. So remote ergonomic is a second best to an in-person ergonomic assessment.
And Steve Wilson, could you also maybe briefly just talk about how you work with people? Do they come see you? Do you go see them?
Usually they'll contact me and they'll have a wish list of what they want to do regarding furniture. If it's ergonomically oriented, then we definitely have to meet face to face, and showroom's usually best because there's a lot of different options within a showroom setting, especially for seating. Like I was saying before, the regular desks and accessories are kind of a lot easier than the chair. Chair's got to be a lot tougher, and that requires people to put their fannies in them and test drive them. And if they have a price point, then I can guide them to things that might work for them within that budget.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for coming out today and taking part in this webinar. It's been a lot of really good information. We've recorded this. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel and circulate it as well. And we'll include ways to contact you for assessments and other questions about furniture. We've had several in the chat. Closing thoughts, Steve Dubin, do you have any in wrapping up here?
No, excuse me. It was a great presentation. I learned a lot, and maybe someday I'll sit up straight and have no pain in my wrists. So,
all right,
with your help.
Well, thank you again, Jennifer and Steve Wilson, for coming out today, and everybody who attended. And set up straight, I guess. That's we'll start there. That was the Straight Talk on Office Ergonomics. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.